Picture the scene. It's Blizzcon 2023, and Chris Metzen is getting up onto the World of Warcraft stage to deliver the big announcement that we've all been waiting for. He shouts out for the Horde and Alliance players, and gets cheers of genuine enthusiasm from the crowd for the first time in years. He talks for a while about the long and storied history of WoW, before moving on to discuss the remarkable success of Classic since its release. Who would have thought that so many people prefer vanilla flavoured ice cream over the 16 artificial flavour blended, dairy-free, cream and iceless version of today? Well, he adds, I guess vanilla is pretty great. It's a classic, if you will. But what if you could get your vanilla ice cream with sprinkles on it? With a grin on his face, Metzen steps back and lets the trailer play as we are presented with our first look at World of Warcraft Classic Plus. Available exclusively on phones and tablet devices. Okay, for real though, I would be genuinely surprised if Classic Plus was announced this year at BlizzCon. Not because it's a bad idea or it isn't what the players want. On the contrary, I think it would be an excellent announcement that would be extremely positively received. No, I think Classic Plus is unlikely because it's a gamble. It requires work. It mandates the allocation of resources to Classic WoW by Blizzard that they would otherwise not need if they were simply continuing to milk old, already finished expansions for the rest of time. Most importantly, Classic Plus requires decision making. Decisions about what content should be included, what the setting should be, how that content should be released, and so on. And I realise that despite talking about Classic Plus in pretty much every video I've made recently, I've never gone into any detail about what I would personally want and how I would design and deliver Classic Plus if it were up to me. So today let's put on our tinfoil hats and inject ourselves with a lethal dose of copium. My name is Vulgrin. My friends, let's talk Classic Plus. Oh, and before we get into this, please note, this is going to be a long one, so strap yourself in or get out while you still can. It's obviously one big hypothetical as well, a what-if scenario for a game we will likely never even see. So if that's not your thing, consider yourself warned. Alright, let's go. Okay, so the first and most important question when designing Classic Plus is when? When should it begin? You need to get over this hurdle before you can even start to think about what features and content you'd actually like to add to the game, and it should give you an idea of how difficult making Classic Plus could be when you consider just how varied the opinions of players are as to when it should begin. In my view, there are only two realistic, viable choices at this point. Either Classic Plus comes after the end of Vanilla WoW, or after the end of Wrath. Let's look at the case for Wrath first. Well, to begin with, most Classic players are currently playing it and looking forward to taking on the Lich King if they haven't done so already. It's the climax of the expansion. But Wrath will continue on for some time, more than enough time for additional content to slowly be implemented after it comes to an end. Furthermore, Wrath is considered by many players to be the final installment of the so-called Classic Trilogy, the last chapter of old WoW prior to the revamp which came in the Cataclysm. By the end of Wrath of the Lich King, you've tied up most of the storylines that were established in Warcraft 3, and you can make a strong argument that if there is an end to what Classic is, it comes with the end of Wrath. What better time to branch off in a new direction than at the end of the original Classic story? And there are good reasons for Wrath being the point at which to begin Classic Plus beyond the convenient timing and it being the end of the trilogy. There are many good features which were introduced in or by Wrath, which I think a lot of Classic players would like to see continue into a Classic Plus. Primarily, I think class design had come a long way by Wrath of the Lich King. You weren't stuck in a situation where only one specialisation was viable for many classes, and where combat often consisted of pressing 2 or 3 buttons for 90% of the time. That's not me hating on vanilla, far from it, but if there is one area where I think it could definitely be improved, class development is certainly it. Instanced content is also a lot more involved by the time of Wrath compared to vanilla. I know this is obviously subjective, but my view is that vanilla raids are, like all of the classic game, grand and immersive, but they lack the excitement and the involvement which came later. Bosses have very few mechanics, and whilst this might have been challenging for raiders back in 2005, the game has moved on, players have gotten better, and for anyone with even basic raiding experience from the last decade, these raids aren't difficult. The challenge in vanilla raiding isn't the content itself, it's actually organising a team of 40 people, getting most of them to show up on the night and managing to make them do as they're told. Honestly, to me, it sounds like being an elementary school teacher except with dumber students. That might sound like fun to some of you, but I like the challenge in my raids to come from the content itself, not the organisation. The final argument I'll make for Classic Plus coming after the end of Wrath is that the storytelling in Wrath is excellent. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's the highlight of the expansion for me. An increased use of voice-acted dialogue, in-game events like the Wrathgate, and the introduction of phasing technology to update the game world in real time, all of these things combine to make the game feel alive, and I think generally these improvements made non-instance content far more interesting. But with all that being said, and as strong a case I may have made for Wrath being the point at which to launch Classic Plus, I don't think it should take place at the end of Wrath Classic, for a few reasons. My primary issue with Wrath is that, for me, the game had already become far too retail-like, for want of a better word, by the end of Wrath of the Lich King. I don't want Classic Plus to include looking for group, heirlooms, a cash shop, and so on. Hell, I don't even want it to have flying mounts. As cool as they were, they became symptomatic of the race to the finish approach of World of Warcraft as it progressed through its expansions. Furthermore, by the end of Wrath, the separation between the old world and the current content was already pretty evident. If Classic Plus is ever going to happen and succeed, Blizzard need to move away from the norm they established, whereby every new expansion has its own new landmass. I get the argument for it, travelling to a new and dangerous continent is thrilling, but in the long run it broadens the divide between low and high level players. Newcomers to the game don't see as many corrupted Ashbringer wielding chads out in the wild, and as such they don't feel like they're really playing the game. Well, not until they leave the old world behind and go to the new, interesting, shiny place that has been created for the current expansion. The irony here is that I think TBC would be a much better point to launch Classic Plus from than Wrath if it was going to come after one of the expansions. I say irony because now that we've moved on from TBC Classic, I think it's extremely unlikely that, in the already unlikely event that we get Classic Plus, it will be set at the end of the Burning Crusade. TBC though was much closer to Classic and Warcraft 3 in its aesthetic. It actually had content based in the old world like Karazhan, Sunwell Plateau, not to mention the Blood Elf and Draenei starting areas. Yet it still saw significant developments for the classes and improvements to endgame instance content. Simply put, TBC feels like Classic era WoW far more than Wrath does, and as much as I am all about vanilla, I think that in most cases, the Burning Crusade added something good for every good thing it took away from vanilla WoW. Now I'm going to make a separate video soon about TBC and why we should have Classic servers for it again, but I won't discuss it any further here because this video is about Classic Plus, and as I just said, it's very unlikely that if we get Classic Plus, it will come at the end of the Burning Crusade. And finally, that brings us on to what I view as clearly the best option when it comes to a setting for Classic Plus, and that is vanilla, Classic era WoW. You can argue for as long as you like about the positive features brought in with TBC and Wrath, but there is no reason why those features couldn't be added or adapted as part of new Classic Plus content. I'll go into more detail about what I'd want for Classic Plus in just a moment, but suffice to say, things like more involved boss design, further class development, more scripted events and voice acting, look, there's no reason why those benefits of the expansions could not be retrofitted for vanilla. And ultimately for me, Wrath carries with it too much modern WoW baggage for it to be the right starting point for Classic Plus. So, to vanilla then. Kel'Thuzad is defeated, Naxx 40 man has been cleared, and there are tons of dudes running around with rank 14 gear and Thunder Furies. On to Classic Plus then, right? Well, no. Let's rewind a bit, because I don't see any way of starting Classic Plus without having fresh servers implemented first, and if you're going to do that, you face another key question. Do you go through all of the standard base vanilla content before adding the new stuff, or do you add it right from the get-go? My view is that the ideal path would be to launch fresh servers with additional content from the start, but I'm not talking about new endgame content, not at first. We'll get to that later. Instead, I would launch fresh Classic servers complete with class developments, tuning, and possibly even additions to pre-existing instances and encounters to make them more challenging or interesting. In some ways, this first phase would be similar to the Season of Mastery, just with a lot more going on. I think that this would be a great way to begin the Classic Plus project for a few reasons. Firstly, by starting Classic Plus from fresh, but with some improvements and additions to the way the game feels to play, you would build hype for the bigger stuff yet to come, while still capitalising on the nostalgia of vanilla. People would get to feel like they were playing the game they know and love, whilst experiencing the adjustments they'd always hoped for. On a more cynical note, it would also give Blizzard sufficient time to create the bigger content patches that would come after the end of the Naxx patch. Some examples of this early added content to the fresh Classic Plus servers would be making specs like Ret Paladin, Balanced Druid and Shadow Priest viable in PvE, which would be a lot easier than some people like to make out. Balancing always has to be taken into account, but I mean for the Paladin, the simple inclusion of Crusader Strike and some talent adjustments to allow for mana conservation would on its own make Retribution at least serviceable at endgame. On a side note, this would likely require the addition of new items alongside these changes to the game to assist in making these newly viable specs, well, viable. That would involve quite a bit of work and it would change some things that people might not like, but hey, this is Classic Plus, right? And it wouldn't be an insurmountable challenge by any means. I personally would argue that alongside improvements to the classes and additional boss mechanics and tweaking, the addition of some new weapons and gear would actually help keep vanilla content fresh as the servers progress through the old vanilla content. So yeah, class improvements, boss tuning and tweaking, that's how I would start. I wouldn't push the boat out further than that at first anyway. You know, there are a lot of people who instantly think about the introduction of new races if we were ever to get Classic Plus, but controversial as it might be, I would probably save that till quite some time later. Adding races is great and all, but to do it right, you'd need to add in their own zones, as well as NPCs and quests throughout the whole pre-existing game world. And whilst I would enjoy getting to play as, say, ogres or high elves, I think that improving unfinished aspects of the vanilla game should be the first task of Classic Plus, not adding in content that would largely just be cosmetic additions, which is ultimately what new races are. Moving on then to the actual post-classic content, the real good stuff. At this point, the fresh servers have progressed through to Naxxramas, probably on some kind of accelerated timeline compared to actual vanilla, something which I think would probably be aided by the class adjustments I mentioned earlier. This is the point at which I would focus on delivering the big content additions to Classic in a staggered approach through the use of major patches. They could really go in any direction at this point, and it's anyone's guess as to what would come after Naxx, but here's a brief suggestion of what they could do from yours truly. So, for outdoor content, I would like to see the addition of Hyjal as a max level zone. This would be the first new area added in Classic Plus, and I think that it would be perfect. Can you imagine how fun it would be to uncover what happened after the end of Warcraft 3 here? I can see a story themed around the Horde and Alliance helping the Tauren and Night Elves respectively to repair the damage left in the wake of the demonic assault, and to uncover the mysteries of Mount Hyjal. This would be a very large zone indeed, with its own dungeon and a world boss. For the dungeon, I would take inspiration from Moradon, one of my favourite vanilla dungeons. Imagine exploring an ancient Night Elf barrow, only to end up deep under the very roots of the world tree itself. You could have all sorts of enemies in there, furbolgs, satyrs, demons, even corrupted druids, and in true classic style, I would split the dungeon up into at least 2 parts and make it non-linear so groups could tackle different sections similar to Diamol, Stratholme, or Maraudon. If you wanted, you could make the Barrow section a 5-man instance, whilst designing the deeper, darker area for 10 players. As for the world boss in this hypothetical patch of mine, I'd like to give a nod to TBC at this point, and have a large, monstrous boss patrol the main road through the hardest part of the zone, keeping players on their toes. Instead of a Fel Reaver, something like a Corrupted Ancient would be perfect for this, I think. Finally, I would want to place an emphasis on intertwining the crafting and reputation systems with the instanced PvE content that would follow. There would be ore, herbs and leather available in the open world of Hyjal, which would be necessary for crafting max level shadow resistance consumables, armor patches and so on. And the reason why this shadow resistance would be necessary is that shortly after the release of Hyjal, there would be a demonic themed raid. I was debating what concept would be the best for the first Classic Plus raid, and for me, the obvious option is something Legion based, as there isn't any demonic raid content outside the world boss Doomlord Kazak, and the only even partly demonic themed max level dungeons are the west and east wings of Dire Maul. It's pretty clear that Blizzard had decided that demon stuff was going to be the name of the game for their first expansion, because it's honestly pretty absent from the vanilla endgame, especially given that before all of the crazy cosmic stuff of modern WoW, the Burning Legion was the primary threat to the Warcraft universe. I won't spend too much time on this raid, but what I would do is have it begin in the Blasted Lands, possibly in an updated version of the Tainted Scar, with a massive Legion fortress now present, and ultimately it would lead players to go through the Dark Portal for the last wing of the raid as a nod to the Burning Crusade. This would be a great opportunity for Blizzard to explore the old Outland that they toyed around with and initially intended to be part of the vanilla base game in some form. The best thing about a demonic themed raid would be that the devs could really go wherever they wanted to with the design of encounters and areas, twisting geometry and creating bizarre, surreal encounters, similar to what we saw in Karazhan. Man, I love TBC. Alright, moving on. The last thing I'll mention on the topic of raiding is that the challenge for devs, regardless of what raid content we would see, would be in balancing accessibility with difficulty. I think I speak for the majority of classic players when I say that raid content improved in many ways with the progression from vanilla to TBC and then to Wrath. 40-man raids are fun in their own way, but like I said at the start of this video when talking about vanilla raiding, the challenge is found in the organisation of such a large group of players rather than in the content itself. I would be happy with a transition to 10 and 20-man raids as the norm for Classic Plus, but with much larger groups being required for world bosses, which I think should always be seen as massive, terrifying threats like a dragon burning down a town, or a giant crushing an entire village beneath its feet. These sorts of enemies warrant a whole army of adventurers banding together to take them down, and the open ground in which those encounters take place makes organisation ideally a more straightforward ad hoc process. Ideally. As for the instance raids, like I said, 10 and 20 man is my idea of the way to go. Slimming down the raid group sizes is beneficial not just in improving the ease at which raid teams can be put together and complete content, but also it allows for more involved, exciting and ultimately more challenging boss fights, because those encounters no longer need to be designed with an understanding that up to 40 people are going to be running around doing stuff. Two things that I think need to absolutely be kept in the game if it's to maintain its classic feel though, are the epic proportions of raid environments, which, whilst designed for 40 people, just feel so much grander and more expansive than dungeons and were a great feature of vanilla to me, and secondly, loot scarcity. This is just one way they could go, and an example of a design approach that I think Blizzard could make with Classic Plus for both indoor and outdoor PvE content for one specific patch. There's no reason why they couldn't apply the same approach to other zones and instances further down the line. I mean, there's no way you don't do something interesting with Karazhan at some point, maybe involving the crypts, possibly expand the Scarlet Crusade, or maybe even go somewhere like Tel Abim that we haven't even seen in the retail game. The key here is to try and weave outdoor and instanced content with a focus on presenting players with enjoyable, meaningful world content that provides useful or even necessary benefits for the instance content. The Hyjal dungeon drops a key that's necessary to unlock a secret area in the raid. The outdoor content provides materials for the resistance gear beneficial to surviving the raid. The raid itself provides items necessary for epic quests, as well as materials for the best crafting gear. Interlinking the world and its systems in this manner not only lengthens the experience in an MMO, but it improves the economy and makes players at all levels of progression feel involved in the game. That's my view at least. Another great feature of the game, which really developed with the expansions, particularly from Wrath onwards, which I would love to see come in with Classic Plus, is the use of world events that players could participate in and feel as though they are actively shaping the story. Examples of this in-game are the Darkspear Rebellion in Mists of Pandaria, the opening of the Gates of AQ in Vanilla, and best of all in my view, the Wrathgate event from Wrath of the Lich King. I would love for these to be a regular feature that came with every major patch. I mean, think about it. The threats we face in raids are supposed to be massive, right? So let's have big scripted events where we get to see the mighty heroes of the Horde and Alliance advance the game's story and their characters in a way that leads players into the content they're about to face. Furthermore, with world events like this, there's no reason why low-level players couldn't participate alongside their max-level friends to somehow move along the story and watch the world change around them. That would encourage them to work hard, progress, and get to the endgame content that they've already had a taste of. But let's move away from PvE for a minute and talk about PvP, the true alpha male game mode, am I right? Well, as you might expect for someone who spends his time writing several thousand-word theses on the design of a hypothetical game that will likely never even be made, I'm not exactly the biggest PvP gigachad. Indeed, I'm more likely the rogue player who gets killed in STV and then waits for 10 minutes for the enemy that killed him to be at 10% health fighting pirates before finishing them off. Yes, I am a scumbag. What I'm trying to explain here is that I'm nowhere near as interested in or as experienced when it comes to vanilla PvP, so I'm not about to start advocating for the removal of features like the vanilla ranking system in Classic Plus, because I simply don't feel qualified to discuss it. Still, I do have a few thoughts that I believe a lot of people would agree with when it comes to PvP in Classic Plus. Firstly, we know for a fact that there was cut PvP content from vanilla. There are even screenshots of one area called Ajara Crater that would likely have functions similarly to the Alterac Valley Battleground. The implementation of this Ajara Battleground in some form could be a good idea. Additionally, the introduction of updated PvP gear to align with the newly viable specs that would have been developed as part of Classic Plus would be quite welcome. Honestly though, for me, it's the world PvP of vanilla that I personally enjoy. I know a lot of people hate it and things very quickly escalate from enjoyable running battles in Tanaris or STV to annoying gangfests outside of instances or in international waters. But still, there's something about the danger and the forging of alliances with other nearby players on your faction that I find very compelling and unique to world PvP. I would love for the PvP system of Classic to be expanded to accommodate this, and as much as I can't believe I'm going to say this, one period that Blizzard could take inspiration from in this regard is BFA. No, seriously. As terrible an expansion as BFA was, I have many fond memories of the world PvP from it, and I think that it's a crying shame that Blizzard squandered the opportunity that presented so completely with Shadowlands. Some sort of bounty system, for example, rewarding players for dealing with gankers, but simultaneously encouraging the more merciless players to draw out would-be bounty hunters, would be a really cool idea if implemented properly. And zone-wide objectives to direct players into specific areas of a map to help provoke these sorts of running battles could lead to some fantastic moments, at least in my view. The final design feature that I'd like to discuss in this hypothetical Classic Plus of mine is one that I think about all the time. It's something I consider to be the greatest feature of original Classic WoW. Class quests. Possibly the most underappreciated gem of vanilla. Whether we're talking the quest for the Whirlwind Axe, Verrigan's Fist, Rock Delar, or the Warlock and Paladin Epic Mount quests, I think that the vanilla class quest constitutes some of the most enjoyable and immersive content in the game. They help forge that bond between a player and their character and provide necessary class identity, which was such a powerful factor in vanilla and started to quickly erode away in subsequent expansions. I won't go into a lot of detail here regarding what I would like to see in Classic Plus, but to put it simply, I see no reason why there should not be a Rock Delar style epic quest for every class at max level, involving group and solo play, testing a player's knowledge and skill at their class, and rewarding a lore appropriate respectable epic weapon in return. The key here would of course be in ensuring that this wasn't a walk in the park or a welfare epic, as some people used to call the easily obtained epic gear of later expansions. These quests should be a real test, and the rewards should therefore be worthwhile. I'm going to make a separate video covering the Roc Dalar questline because it's just so good, but I mention it now because to me it's the best example of how a class quest should work. Roc Dalar was a great test of a hunter's dedication to their class and their knowledge of it, while still providing a great story, a world-spanning adventure, and rewarding the player with a truly memorable weapon. Every class should have a quest like this. Imagine a rogue questline inspired by the Dark Brotherhood story from Oblivion, complete with infiltrations and assassination quests, or a warrior quest to single-handedly slay a dragon. What if druids had to venture into the Emerald Dream, or shamans traverse the elemental plane? Part of what I love so much about Vanilla WoW is that it provides you, the player, with an opportunity to play as the type of fantasy character you find cool, whether that's a holy knight of the Silver Hand or an evil warlock brimming with dark power. Class quests are the perfect way of cementing that player character bond. They weave group and solo play and give someone something to look forward to and work on over the long term. I would love to see more of them if we ever do get Classic Plus. In conclusion then, I made this video to properly document my thoughts on how Classic Plus should work if we ever see it, and also to demonstrate just how much thinking would need to go into its design if it were to be done right. Now, I've said many times that as much as I would dearly love for Classic Plus to be announced at BlizzCon 2023, I don't think it's actually going to happen. And sadly, the main reason for that is due to how much care and hard work would need to go into creating it. I've always maintained that modern Blizzard will take the easiest option wherever possible. This is what one should expect from any very large company, where decisions are made based on maximising profits, beating the competition, and capitalising on market trends. The days of Blizzard and other now monolithic game companies being run by and for gamers, with artistry and entertainment being the driving force behind their work, are long gone. I would love to be proven wrong either this year or at any point in the future, not least because I find myself wondering what I'm going to do if we don't get a Classic Plus announcement. I mean, Cataclysm is fine and all, but it's not really classic. Not to me, anyway. And even if there is some revamp for retail WoW that appears to solve a lot of that game's issues, it's still gonna be modern WoW, laden with so much baggage, so transformed from the old game that I love to play. I'm not really sure what I'd do, honestly, but maybe you and I can figure that part out together, further down the line. For now though, my friends, thank you for sticking with me if you got this far. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at Classic Plus as I would design it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Till then though, be well, take care of yourselves, and I shall see you all later. Bye bye!